He gave up his first-class seat for a woman with burn scars. No cameras, no applause, just quiet kindness. The next morning, a presidential helicopter landed outside his cabin, and everything changed. What happened between that small act and a national miracle? This is the true story of how a single dad's silent gesture reached the highest levels of power and healed something far deeper than skin. Vermont, a cabin by the lake, before the world stirs. The sun hadn't risen yet, but the lake already breathed a quiet kind of life mist, curling like ghosts over still water pines, standing sentinel in the hush of dawn. Inside a weathered log cabin nestled at the edge of this quiet expanse, a single light flickered to life, warm and golden against the gray. Adam Carter moved through his morning like a man who'd memorized silence. The old Marine knew the creaks in every floorboard, the stubborn groan of the stovepipe, the exact angle to prop open the front window for a breeze without letting in the chill. His worn green military jacket hung on the back of the door, a white apron tied loosely over a faded t-shirt. He struck a match and lit the fire in the cast-iron stove with the same precision he once used to ignite signal flares in Kandahar. The fire caught slowly, then roared as he closed the iron door. His breath fogged in the cold air, and he rubbed his calloused hands together before pouring water into a dented kettle. Behind him, soft footsteps padded into the room. "Morning, Daddy," a small voice whispered. He turned. Clara stood at the edge of the hallway, her red flannel pajama pants dragging over the wood, her honey blonde hair a mess of waves down her back. She was 9, but seemed older, somehow. Older in her eyes, in the way she noticed things others didn't. "Mornin', sweetheart," Adam said gently. He nodded toward the hearth. "Want to help with the coffee?" Clara grinned and padded forward barefoot. "Can I grind the beans?" He handed her the hand crank grinder, the same one he'd used in forward operating base Sharana, when instant coffee ran out, and someone smuggled in the real thing. Clara sat cross-legged on a stool, the metal grinder steady in her lap, turning the crank with practiced rhythm. As the smell of fresh grounds filled the room, Adam looked out the window toward the lake. A bald eagle glided low over the water wings, spread wide in absolute command of the sky. "Do you think eagles ever get tired?" Clara asked, not looking up from the grinder. He smiled. "Maybe. But they don't stop flying." By the time the kettle whistled, the stove had warmed the kitchen, and the fire cast dancing shadows across the plank walls. Adam poured the hot water over the grounds, in a mason jar dripper Clara had made in woodshop. He handed her a chipped mug with a cartoon raccoon and the word "resilient" in bold blue letters. It had been her mother's favorite. Clara cupped it with both hands and blew across the steam. Adam didn't sit. He rarely did, unless the workday was done. Instead, he stood at the window and stared through his own reflection. Today wasn't just any day. Today, he and Clara would fly to Seattle for his sister Dana's wedding. It would be the first time they'd traveled by plane together, Clara's first flight ever. He hadn't intended to go. Money was tight, and he didn't like leaving the cabin in winter. But then 3 nights ago, he received a text from an old Marine buddy in D.C., Donnie Albright. "Owe you one. Sending you 2 first-class tickets on me. You saved my ass. Least I can do." Adam didn't argue. He just wrote back. "You always had bad taste in payback, but truth be told, the gesture touched him more than he let on. He had never flown first class, never even walked through the cabin. 39 years old, 2 tours behind him, and the only luxury he'd known was an extra blanket during snowstorms. He'd planned on sitting in the back with Clara and making it an adventure, bringing homemade sandwiches, playing word games, pointing out clouds. But now a tiny miracle had landed in his lap. First class. He still wasn't sure he deserved it. After breakfast, Adam packed the last of their things. Clara triple-checked her backpack for the small photo album she never traveled without. Inside were pictures of her mom, Allison Carter, who died when Clara was 4. Cancer. Fast. Cruel. At the doorway, Adam paused, staring up at the dusty shelf above the coat rack. A single item rested there, a folded American flag in a triangular glass case, beside a worn field notebook wrapped in a rubber band. He didn't take the notebook with him anymore. The words inside were for cold nights and harder days. Clara came up beside him, slipping her small hand into his. "Do you think Mom would have liked planes?" He looked down at her. "Your mom liked anything that went fast and scared the heck out of me. So, yeah, she would have loved it." They shared a quiet smile. The pickup rumbled to life, its engine coughing through the morning frost. Adam strapped their bags in the back, checked the tires, and made sure Clara was warm under her puffer jacket and wool hat. As they drove away from the cabin, the woods stretched tall on either side of the narrow road. Snow clung to the branches like frosting on a 1,000-layer cake. "Do planes ever fly over our lake?" Clara asked from the passenger seat. "Sometimes," Adam said. But most people never look down long enough to notice. She stared out the window, thoughtful. "We'll look down." "Right, Daddy." He glanced at her, heart full and breaking at once. "Yeah, baby. We'll look." The horizon was only beginning to blush with color when the truck rolled down the last mile of gravel. Vermont's winter had coated everything in silver branches, heavy with frost rooftops, iced like old postcards. The road toward Boston Logan Airport wound through hills and fog, and Adam Carter drove it like he'd driven convoy routes in Afghanistan, alert, quiet, calculating every turn, but lost somewhere in his thoughts. Clara sat beside him, legs folded beneath her in the passenger seat, peeking over her scarf at the world waking up. She wore a small smile, the kind that flickered when she was thinking deeply. "You okay, sweetheart?" Adam asked. "I'm good," she said, turning to him. "Just wondering what clouds feel like when you fly through them." He smiled, like cotton candy pretending to be soup. Clara giggled softly, then grew quiet again. "Will it be loud?" "Some parts. But we'll be together. You'll have a window seat, and I'll be right next to you." He didn't mention the first-class ticket. He'd decided not to bring it up until they got to the gate. Somehow, it didn't feel right, like telling her they were going to Disneyland, but forgetting to mention it's only a layover. He didn't want her to get attached to luxury. He wanted her to witness kindness, even if she didn't understand it yet. Boston Logan buzzed with early travelers and overhead announcements that echoed like call-outs on a base radio. Adam guided Clara through the automatic doors, his duffel over one shoulder, and her small backpack looped through her arms like wings. Clara turned slowly in place, eyes wide. "It's like a shopping mall, and a spaceship had a baby." He chuckled. "That's one way to describe it." They passed kiosks selling noise-canceling headphones, neck pillows shaped like cartoon animals, and coffee in cups, so large they looked like fuel canisters. As they approached the check-in counter, Adam spotted their flight number on the screen. Seattle. 6:25 a.m. On time. "ID and tickets, please," the agent said. Adam handed over the documents. The woman scanned them, then looked up with a smile. "Oh, first class. Nice treat." Clara's head jerked toward her dad. "Wait, what?" Adam leaned down to her ear and whispered, "Just watch, kiddo." They reached the gate with time to spare. Clara stood at the window, pressing her nose to the glass, as ground crew moved about like busy ants below. A massive jet loomed beyond the terminal glass, its silver fuselage glowing in the morning light. "That's our plane," she whispered, awestruck. Adam nodded, but his eyes were on something else. Someone else. Just a few rows away sat a woman hunched near the far corner of the waiting area. She was wearing a loose charcoal shawl, pulled carefully over one shoulder. Her face turned slightly away, but the visible side was marred. Burned tissue ran from her temple, down across her cheek, and to her jaw. Her left hand was covered in a black compression glove. A scarf hid the rest. People passed her. Some glanced, quickly looked away. A few slowed eyes lingering too long before they caught themselves and turned away, as if ashamed of their own discomfort. Adam recognized the pattern. It wasn't cruelty. It was fear. And fear, in his experience, often showed itself not in violence, but in silence. He watched as a young man in a pressed business suit sat one chair away, looked at her, then slowly got up and walked to another seat across the aisle. Clara saw it too. "Why is she sitting all alone?" she asked, barely audible. Adam knelt down beside her, steady and quiet. "Because most people don't know how to be brave without making noise." Clara frowned. "But we do." He smiled gently. "Yeah, we do." Boarding began. First-class passengers were called. Adam pulled out the boarding passes and looked at them one last time. He didn't hesitate. He walked over to the woman whose eyes widened when she noticed him approaching. "Ma'am," he said softly, offering her one of the tickets. "I believe this belongs to you today." She looked up, startled. "I'm sorry." "Please," he said, voice steady but kind. "Take it. My daughter and I will be just fine." Her lips parted, but no words came. Her good hand trembled as she accepted the slip of paper. The other remained clenched beneath her scarf. "I can't accept this," she whispered. Adam leaned in slightly. "You already did. Enjoy the seat." The moment hung in the air like the hush before taps. Clara took her father's hand and gave a small nod to the woman. "It's a good seat," she said simply. The woman swallowed hard. "Thank you. I'm Diana." "Diana Collins." Adam nodded. "Safe flight, Diana." As she walked toward the gate, Adam caught the faintest shake in her shoulders, like a sob swallowed in the space between breaths. Clara and Adam boarded in Group C, taking their place near the rear of the plane. The seats were tighter, the legroom sparse, but the mood between them was light. "You really gave her your seat?" Clara asked, buckling in. "I gave her a chance to remember what people are supposed to be to each other." "Is that what being kind means?" Adam looked out the window, where the first-class curtain had already been drawn. That's exactly what it means. The slow shuffle of boarding passengers, the overhead bins clicking open and closed. The hum of air nozzles, all of it became background noise, as Diana Collins stood alone at the entrance to the first-class cabin boarding pass, trembling in her gloved hand. The flight attendant smiled politely, clearly surprised. "Welcome aboard, Miss Collins. Right this way." Diana followed her down the plush aisle. Every step felt foreign. She hadn't been in first class since before the explosion, before her world shrank to hospital rooms, pain scales, and a mirror she no longer trusted. She paused at seat 2A. A blanket was folded neatly over the armrest, a glass of water already waited by the window. The man across the aisle glanced at her, offered a tight smile, then looked away quickly. Too quickly. Diana exhaled slowly, lowered herself into the seat, and placed her carry-on at her feet. The leather felt too soft, too generous. She ran her good hand along the armrest, not quite believing she belonged there. She didn't. That man, Adam, he said he did. And he'd given this up. Back in coach, Clara tugged at her father's sleeve as they slid into row 32. "Do you think she's comfortable?" she whispered. Adam smiled faintly. "I hope so." The seats were cramped, the window fogged, and the legroom non-existent. But Clara looked around like it was a castle in the sky. She reached into her backpack and pulled out 2 peanut butter sandwiches wrapped in wax paper. "Made them last night," she said. "One for you." "One for me." Adam chuckled. "Is this our in-flight meal?" "We're fancy," she said with mock seriousness. The engines roared to life, 30 minutes after takeoff, Adam stretched his legs under the seat and looked around. A toddler 2 rows up screamed in exhaustion. A man across the aisle coughed into a sleeve. Somewhere, someone snored already. He leaned back and closed his eyes, but something nagged at him. A presence. He opened the seatback tray and found a neatly folded napkin inside. Not his. The texture was different first-class stock. The handwriting was delicate slanted, and the ink had slightly bled at the edges. No one has shown me such kindness in years. D. Adam stared at the note. A beat passed, then another. He folded it slowly and tucked it into the inner pocket of his green jacket. In the first-class cabin, Diana sat with her tray untouched. The flight attendant had offered her champagne. She declined. Warm nuts. Declined. But when the woman brought her a lavender-scented towel and a silk pillow, Diana accepted with a fragile smile. She hadn't slept well in months. Her scars itched. Her left hand, though healing, still flared with pain at high altitudes. But as she leaned her head against the window, something softened inside her. She thought of the man in row 32, the steady eyes, the quiet dignity, the girl with hair like gold maple leaves and eyes that didn't flinch when they looked at her. No one had looked at her like that in years. No one had seen her, not the scars, but her. An hour passed. Then 2. Clara was asleep, head on her father's shoulder, her tiny socked feet curled beneath her. Adam gazed out the window, watching clouds drift like ancient whales through the sky. His thoughts drifted too. He thought of Corporal Davy, burned over 60% of his body when their vehicle hit an IED in Fallujah. Adam had held Davy's hand as they airlifted him, promising he'd be okay, even when he knew he wouldn't. Davy had died 6 days later. He thought of how at the funeral Davy's mother refused to speak to anyone but Adam. She handed him her son's dog tags and said, "He trusted you. That's all I need to know." Adam had never forgotten that. He looked down at the jacket on his lap and the napkin folded inside its pocket. That woman, Diana, wasn't just some random passenger. She was someone carrying a pain the world couldn't or wouldn't understand. But he understood. The captain's voice crackled over the intercom. "Ladies and gentlemen, we've reached cruising altitude. Estimated time to Seattle is just under 5 hours. Sit back, relax, and thank you for flying with us." As the announcement ended, Clara stirred. "Daddy," she mumbled, eyes half closed. "Yeah, baby, I think Mom would be proud of you today." Adam's throat caught. He turned, brushing a strand of hair from her face. "I hope so." Near the front of the plane, Diana opened her carry-on and removed a small leather notebook, burned along the edges, pages warped but still usable. She turned to a clean page. She hadn't written anything personal in it for over a year. But tonight, she needed to. She wrote today, "A man gave me something no surgeon, no medal, no headline ever could. He reminded me that I'm more than what's been taken from me. He reminded me I'm still here." She paused, then added one last line. "And maybe, just maybe, I'm still worthy of being seen." The cabin lights dimmed to a soft blue haze, casting long shadows across the rows of weary passengers. Somewhere in the distance, a baby cried softly. The hum of the engines had long become a lullaby, steady, unrelenting like waves crashing in the sky. In seat 32B, Adam Carter shifted carefully in his narrow seat. His right arm had gone numb beneath Clara's head, but he didn't move it. His daughter was fast asleep, mouth slightly open, her face turned toward him, as if she still needed to know he was there, even in dreams. Coach seating wasn't made for comfort, certainly not for men with marine-built shoulders and memories that didn't sit still. But Adam didn't complain. He never had. Not when he slept in tents during sandstorms, not when he huddled against cold steel in an Afghan winter, and certainly not now. He glanced around at the passengers nearby. Most were asleep. A few scrolled through seatback screens or stared at nothing, their faces lit in flickers of blue. One man snored quietly under a Red Sox blanket. Another clutched a paperback, but hadn't turned a page in an hour. It was that kind of night. A drifting one. Quiet. Thoughtful. Adam reached into his jacket pocket and pulled out the napkin again. He unfolded it slowly, smoothing its creases. No one has shown me such kindness in years. D. He ran his thumb gently across the signature. A single letter. D. Diana. A flight attendant passed by with a tray of water bottles and sleep masks. She paused when she saw him. "You okay, sir?" Adam nodded. "All good, thanks." She hesitated, then leaned down slightly and whispered, "I saw what you did earlier, giving her your seat." He didn't respond. She's someone important," the attendant added. "Not just because of the scars. She was in the news once. Big story a couple years ago. Explosion overseas. Saved people." Adam gave a small nod. "Doesn't surprise me. She didn't tell anyone. Just boarded like any other passenger. But I think what you did, it meant more than you know." Adam's voice was low. "I didn't do it for credit. I know. That's what made it real." She left him with that thought and disappeared down the aisle. Clara stirred, shifting slightly and blinking up at her father. "Still flying?" she asked groggily. "Still flying," Adam said, brushing a strand of hair from her face. Clara sat up, slowly rubbing her eyes. "How long left? A few hours." She reached into her backpack and pulled out a small, travel-sized sketch pad. With a blue marker, she began to draw quietly, thoughtfully. Adam watched her, wondering what lived in that young mind of hers. She was only 9, but there were days she carried herself like a woman twice her age. Losing her mother had changed her, not hardened her, but deepened her. "What are you drawing?" he asked. She held it up. It was a cabin, their cabin by the lake. Smoke puffed from the chimney. A figure stood at the window. Next to it, she had drawn the outline of a helicopter hovering above in the sky. "Is that you and me?" he asked, pointing. "No," Clara whispered. "That's her. The lady you helped." Adam looked at the sketch again. "Why is she at our cabin?" Clara shrugged. "I don't know. Just felt like maybe one day she'd visit." There was a strange stillness between them after that. Adam reached for his backpack and pulled out a pocket-sized field notebook, his old deployment log. Inside were half-filled pages of coordinates, supply lists, and later more personal scribbles. Letters never sent dreams scribbled at 2 a.m. between rocket alerts. He flipped to a blank page and began writing in block letters. "Kindness isn't weakness. It's the strongest thing a soldier can carry." A few rows ahead, a man began coughing uncontrollably. The cabin stirred. A flight attendant rushed over, offered water tissues. People craned their necks, then looked away again. Restless silence returned. Adam sighed and turned to Clara. "Want to hear a story?" She nodded eagerly, crawling up onto her knees. He began quietly, as if telling it for himself as much as for her. "There was this village," he said, "in Helmand Province. Dirt roads. No power. Kids ran barefoot through the ruins. They'd wave at us every day when we rolled through. But one day, one of them stepped on a landmine. We were too late." Clara's smile faded. "I thought, what's the point? All that training, all that gear, and we couldn't stop a child from dying." He paused, choosing his words. "That night I gave my meal rations to the boy's sister. She didn't say thank you. She just sat next to me and ate every bite in silence." "Was she mad?" Clara asked. "No," he said softly. "She was surviving. That moment stayed with me. I couldn't fix the world, but I could give someone a full belly. Sometimes that's enough." Clara leaned her head back against his shoulder again. "You always try to do the right thing, don't you?" He smiled faintly. Not always. But I try to make it a habit. Near the front of the plane behind the first-class curtain, Diana was awake. She couldn't sleep, not with so many voices inside her. The past, the screams, the heat of the blast, the long months of being touched only by latex gloves and pitying glances. But tonight was different. The man in 32B had reached across a line no one else dared. Not with fanfare, not with sympathy. Just quiet, clean kindness. The kind that didn't ask questions or expect anything back. She reached into her coat pocket and removed a silver pin, a small, battered Marine Corps insignia she had kept since her first deployment. She held it in her hand for a moment, then slipped it into the seatback pocket with a note. To the man in row 32B, for seeing more than what the world lets us be. D. The plane hummed on into the night. Somewhere over the Dakotas, while most souls on board slept and dreamed of ordinary tomorrows, a seed of something extraordinary had been planted, and neither Adam nor Diana had any idea how far its roots would reach. The crunch of tires over snow was the only sound that greeted them as the truck pulled into the cabin drive. Vermont had kept its promise. Thick snow still blanketed the pine-studded landscape like an untouched canvas. The lake had begun to freeze over delicate cracks, forming crystalline veins across its pale surface. The wind carried the faint scent of pine sap and wood smoke. In the half-light of late afternoon, the world felt paused, waiting. Adam killed the engine and sat still for a beat. Home, he murmured almost to himself. Clara stretched in the passenger seat, yawning. Her cheeks were pink from the cold, her eyes still foggy from the nap she took during the last leg of the drive. Did it snow while we were gone? Adam stepped out of the truck and looked up at the sky, low clouds, the kind that promised more snow by morning. Looks like it, he said. Let's get the fire going before our toes freeze off. Inside, the cabin welcomed them like an old friend, cool, quiet, and familiar. The scent of cedarwood lingered, blending with the sharp edge of winter air. Clara ran straight to the hearth, tossing off her boots and clapping her hands for warmth. Adam followed with their bags, pausing only to brush the snow from the front step. Within minutes, the fire crackled again in the stove, casting golden flickers on the walls. Adam moved through the motions of unpacking with the precision of habit. Jackets, hung bags, emptied mugs, washed, lights checked. But something lingered in him, a quiet residue of the past few days. Seattle had been beautiful. The wedding was joyful. His sister radiant in a simple lace gown under a canopy of lights. Clara had danced barefoot with the bride and caught the bouquet with an accidental tumble. Laughter had come easily. And yet, what stayed with him wasn't the reception or the toast, or even the distant relatives he hadn't seen in years. It was Diana, the soft-spoken woman with the burned skin and unwavering eyes. The way she had looked at him in the airport. The napkin. The silver Marine Corps pin he'd found tucked inside the seat pocket after landing, wrapped in another small note. One soldier to another. Some wounds are seen, others are carried. Thank you. D. He hadn't told Clara about the pin, not yet. Some moments deserved silence. That evening, as snow began to fall again, Clara sat cross-legged at the dining table, a mug of cocoa in one hand and a purple marker in the other. "Can I ask something weird?" she said suddenly. Adam, who was mending a loose floorboard by the stove, looked up. "Sure." Clara tapped the marker against her lip. "Do you think people come into our lives for a reason?" Adam leaned back on his heels, considering. "Some people," he said slowly, "show up like storms, loud, messy, and hard to forget. And others," he nodded, "others show up like music you didn't know you needed. Quiet at first, but you can't stop hearing it once it starts." She thought about that, then went back to her drawing. Adam stood and walked over to the kitchen counter. There, he reached into the inside pocket of his military jacket, still hanging from its hook, and pulled out the silver pin Diana had left for him. He turned it over in his palm. The eagle globe and anchor had dulled with time, but remained proud. It was the kind of symbol you didn't wear lightly, the kind you earned. He placed it gently into the wooden bowl, where he kept matches, his wedding ring, and a few coins from places that no longer existed on modern maps. Later that night, while Clara slept curled under a patchwork quilt, Adam sat outside on the porch with a thermos of black coffee and the old field notebook in his lap. The moon cast silver light on the lake, and somewhere in the woods, an owl called, once then fell silent. He opened to a blank page and wrote, December 5th returned home today. Nothing changed. And yet, something in me has. Not sure what to do with that yet. Clara asked if people come into our lives for a reason. I didn't have an answer then, but I think I'm starting to. She's a soldier too. Not in uniform, but in how she walks through fire and doesn't flinch. He closed the notebook and leaned back in the creaking chair, watching the breath fog rise and disappear. The next morning, Adam awoke early and wandered into the main room. Clara had already risen. She stood at the table taping something to the wall just above her study corner. It was a single sheet of paper, hand-lettered in marker, framed with tiny stars and stick-figure doodles. Kindness. Strength. Adam stood quietly in the doorway, heart caught in his throat. He didn't ask where the idea came from. He didn't need to. That afternoon, life returned to its quiet rhythm. Adam repaired a broken gutter. Clara practiced spelling words from her winter school packet. They made chili from scratch-roasted marshmallows over the stove flame and read aloud from a worn copy of Island of the Blue Dolphins. But underneath the surface, beneath the quiet wood grain of the cabin, beneath the clinking spoons and the laughter, something had shifted. A stillness that used to feel like loneliness now felt like anticipation, like something was coming, and far away in a city neither of them had ever planned to visit again. Someone was speaking Adam's name behind closed doors, with quiet reverence and the weight of memory. Change was already in motion. It just hadn't knocked on their cabin door yet. The morning began like any other. Adam Carter stirred awake before the sun had fully risen. The sky outside the cabin was that pale, glassy blue that came just before daylight broke. The lake sat frozen and unmoving, the trees dusted with fresh snow from the night before. In the wood stove embers still glowed faintly from the fire he'd banked the evening prior. He reached for the flannel shirt slung over the footboard, pulled it on, and moved quietly through the cabin. Clara was still asleep, her hair fanned across her pillow like golden thread, her arm clutching a stuffed bear, so worn its ear had long been sewn back on. Adam smiled. He filled the kettle, set it on the stove, and stepped outside to split a few logs. Cold air bit at his cheeks. The axe was cool in his hand, routine, familiar, comforting. But just as he raised the first log, the sound hit. Not the wind, not the distant cry of a loon, but something far heavier, mechanical, rhythmic, whoop, 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 the kind of sound you feel in your chest before you hear it clearly in your ears. It was faint at first, but rising, approaching fast. Adam froze the axe suspended midair, his senses tightening the way they had during combat alerts. He turned his eyes toward the tree line, and then he saw it. Over the ridge, emerging slowly but unmistakably from the morning mist, came the sleek, polished body of a helicopter, green and white with gleaming engines, and an unmistakable insignia emblazoned on its side, United States of America. Adam's pulse quickened. He dropped the axe and ran to the porch, boots crunching snow. The rotors thudded louder, now echoing through the valley, shaking the icicles loose from the eaves. Inside the cabin, Clara stirred. She rubbed her eyes and stumbled to the door. "Daddy?" What's that sound? Adam pulled her close, wrapping her coat around her. I don't know yet, he said. But his tone betrayed him. He knew this wasn't normal. Not for a man like him. Not for a place like this. The helicopter circled once, then began to descend, hovering low over the frozen lake. Snow whipping up like a cyclone around it. Clara's eyes went wide. Is that Adam nodded slowly. That's Marine One. The very aircraft reserved for presidents, top generals, and the most classified of missions. Why was it landing here? Why now? The skids touched down on the snowy clearing near the edge of the woods. The rotors slowed but did not stop. The door opened, and for a long moment all Adam and Clara could see was a flurry of snow and shadowy movement. Then came two men in dark suits, Secret Service clearly making their way briskly toward the cabin. One of them raised a gloved hand and knocked on the wooden frame of the porch. Mr. Adam Carter, he asked loud, but respectful. Adam nodded. That's me. The man pulled back his hood. Clean-shaven. Professional. There's someone aboard who'd like to see you. Personally? Adam's brow furrowed. He glanced down at Clara, whose small hand found his instinctively. Who, he asked. The agent simply stepped aside and gestured toward the open cabin of the chopper. And then she stepped out. Diana Collins. But this was not the same woman from the airport. Gone were the shawls and gloves and guarded posture. Today she stood in full dress, uniform, midnight blue, with gold trim polished boots, bars of commendation across her chest and at her collar. The Medal of Honor. The sun chose that moment to break through the trees. Light spilled over the frozen lake and onto Diana's face, illuminating the burn scars that climbed up her jaw and across one cheek, but she did not hide them now. She walked forward with the calm command of someone who had once led troops through fire. Clara gasped. It's her! Adam's voice came low and steady. Yeah, it's her. Diana stopped at the bottom of the porch steps. Permission to come aboard? She said, her eyes warm. Adam blinked. This ain't a base, Colonel, she smiled. Then I suppose I'll just have to be your guest. Inside the cabin was warm again. Clara poured hot cocoa, while Adam brewed coffee, his hand steady but his heart racing. Diana stood near the fire, removing her gloves, taking in the room with quiet reverence, as if trying to memorize every detail. Her gaze landed briefly on the wooden bowl on the counter. Inside it coins a wedding ring, a folded napkin, and the silver marine pin she'd left. Adam followed her eyes. You recognize that I never forget what I leave behind, she said gently. They sat across from one another at the rough-hewn kitchen table. Clara perched on a stool nearby, watching everything with wide, curious eyes. Adam finally broke the silence. Why are you here? Diana looked down, then met his gaze. After I got off that flight, I was on my way to D.C. to receive this. She tapped the medal at her chest. The highest honor this country gives. They flew me to the White House, speeches, cameras, handshakes. But all I could think about was that napkin, that moment. You. Adam swallowed hard. I've met soldiers, Adam, heroes, medal winners, but none of them ever made me feel human the way you did. She took a breath. So I told my story, and when the president asked if there was anyone I'd want to thank in person, anyone who reminded me why I fought, I said your name. Adam was speechless. Clara leaned forward. You rode in a helicopter just to see us. Diana turned to her, smiling softly. I rode in a helicopter to say thank you. The wind had calmed outside. Snow still drifted lazily through the trees, but inside the cabin, it felt like spring had arrived early, in the form of a miracle, wrapped in a dress uniform and courage. Adam leaned back, exhaled slowly, and for the first time in a long while felt something unfurl inside him, Hope! The fire crackled softly in the wood stove, filling the cabin with a warm, cedar-scented glow. Outside, the snow continued its slow descent, gentle and unhurried blanketing the Vermont woods in silence. But inside, something monumental was unfolding. Colonel Diana Collins sat at Adam Carter's kitchen table, her polished dress uniform a stark contrast to the rustic wood around her. The Medal of Honor shimmered faintly on her chest, but it was the scars across her face and hand that held Clara's attention. Clara, now curled in the armchair near the hearth, didn't stare out of fear or pity. She watched Diana the same way she watched migrating geese or the stars that came out over their lake, curiously, reverently trying to understand something larger than herself. Adam sat across from Diana, silent, his calloused fingers wrapped around a mug of black coffee he hadn't touched since she walked in. "I wasn't supposed to make it out," Diana said finally, her voice even, but soft. Adam looked up. She ran her fingers over the rim of her mug coffee untouched. "It happened 3 years ago. Northern Syria. We were on a classified extraction op, small unit. Nighttime. We'd gotten the target, one of our own, a captured pilot, and were preparing for exfil. Then the intel changed." Adam nodded slightly. He didn't need details. He'd been there in different deserts in different years. They hit us with everything they had. Mortars, gunfire. One round hit a nearby ammo dump we hadn't accounted for. I was closest when it ignited. Covered the others. Got them out. Didn't even realize I was on fire until I heard someone screaming and realized it was me. A long silence followed. The only sound was the slow tick of the wall clock and the hiss of snow melting on the stovepipe. "I spent 6 months in a burn unit," Diana continued. "Another year in physical therapy. I've had 19 surgeries. And still, I couldn't make people look me in the eye." Clara shifted. Her small voice broke the silence. "But you're brave. They should." Diana turned to her, and for a moment her tough military demeanor softened. "Thank you, Clara. But it's hard for people to see past damage, even when you've done something right, especially when it's visible." Adam finally spoke, voice gravelly and low. "But you still wear the uniform." Diana met his eyes. "Because I refuse to disappear." There was steel in her voice now, quiet and strong. "That day at the airport, I thought I'd vanish into another row of polite avoidance, people pretending I wasn't there. Then you stood up." Adam shrugged. "It was just a seat." Diana shook her head, her tone firmer. "It was everything." She reached into her breast pocket and pulled out a folded document, small, official, and creased at the edges. She laid it gently on the table between them. "This is a copy of the address I gave at the ceremony. I didn't name you directly, classified context and all, but I told them the truth. Adam didn't touch the paper. I told them that on the way to receive the highest honor of my life, I encountered the purest one." Their eyes locked. "You didn't know who I was," she said. "You didn't ask. You saw someone hurting and did what no medal or order could force you, chose compassion. Without condition. Without witness. That's what makes it powerful." Adam's jaw tightened, and he leaned back slightly in his chair. "I just did what I hoped someone would do for my daughter one day." Diana smiled faintly. That's exactly why it mattered. Clara stood and tiptoed to the table. She looked at the Medal of Honor, then at Diana's burn scars, and finally up to her father. "Can I ask something?" "Of course," Diana said. "Does it still hurt?" Diana paused. "Sometimes. Not as much on the outside anymore." Clara tilted her head. "Did helping people hurt too?" There was a moment's hush. Then Diana said, "Helping people never hurt me. But being forgotten did." Adam's expression shifted, subtle, like a cloud passing over the sun. He understood that feeling too well. The medals, the folded flags, the sudden hollow silence of being done with service while the war still lived inside you. Later, they stood outside the cabin, the snow now light and slow like feathers. Marine One waited silently in the clearing, its rotors idle. "I have to return this afternoon," Diana said, adjusting her coat. "But I didn't want to leave without seeing you face to face, without thanking you the way I'd thank any of my own who pulled me from fire." Adam nodded. "You didn't have to fly all this way." "But I did," she said, stepping closer. "Because sometimes words are all we have, and sometimes we need to show up." She hesitated, then added quietly, "I'll be going in for one last reconstruction surgery in 2 weeks, Hawaii Base Hospital. After that, they want me back on command rotation." Adam arched a brow. "Back in the field. Not combat," she said, "but active. Real work. Real purpose." She hesitated. "I could use someone like you on the trip. Not as a soldier. As a reminder." Adam didn't answer right away. He looked down at Clara, who had silently taken his hand. She looked up at him, her voice a whisper only he could hear. "You helped her once, Daddy. Maybe now she needs more." Adam met Diana's gaze again. "I'll think about it." As Diana turned to board the helicopter, she stopped and glanced back. "By the way, the President sends his regards." Adam blinked. "You're kidding." "I wish I were. He wanted to offer you a medal. I said you'd probably prefer silence." She winked. And with that, she stepped into Marine One, leaving snow swirling in her wake. Adam and Clara watched it rise, slicing the air with presidential precision until it was gone. Nothing but the sound of the trees remained. But everything had changed. 2 days had passed since Marine One lifted off from the snowy clearing outside the Carter cabin, and yet the sound of its rotors still echoed faintly in Adam's chest, like a distant drum that refused to fade. He hadn't slept much. Every time he closed his eyes, he saw Diana's face. The scars, yes, but more than that, the steel behind them and the vulnerability she had allowed him to see. Her words stayed with him, turning over like coals in a low fire. "I could use someone like you on the trip." He hadn't told anyone he was considering it, not his brother in New Hampshire, not his Marine buddies in the group text that rarely buzzed anymore, not even Clara. And yet, somehow, Clara knew. She always did. It was Friday morning when the next surprise arrived, not with noise this time, but with silence. Adam found the envelope tucked between 2 logs in the woodpile, sealed with an official-looking stamp and pressed in weather-resistant plastic. Clara stood beside him as he pulled it open, brows furrowed. Inside was a sleek white folder. The seal of the Department of Defense was printed on the corner, and beneath it, his name, printed in bold, Staff Sergeant Adam Carter Rhett. Civilian guest authorization. Naval transport. Clara's breath caught. "Is this?" Adam opened the folder further. A set of official travel documents fell out along with 2 laminated tags, marked with military codes, clearance badges, and a simple itinerary. Destination Joint Base, Pearl Harbor, Hickam Purpose, medical accompaniment, guest honorary departure. Sunday, 800 hours, via military charter passengers. Carter Adams, for Carter. Clara Adams stared. And then he saw it, a note scribbled in handwriting he recognized instantly. Diana's. "You gave up your seat once. This time we saved you 2. Hawaii awaits." Clara clapped her mittened hands over her mouth. "We're going to Hawaii." Adam didn't answer right away. His throat was thick. Instead, he looked up toward the lake, still frozen, still unmoved, and felt for the first time in years the unmistakable rustling of hope pressing against the edge of his heart. Sunday, 0800 hours. A military transport jet, sleek enormous, and humming like a sleeping lion, waited on the runway at a secure airfield north of Boston. The tarmac was wet from melting snow, and the sky overhead was pale gold with morning. Adam wore his old dress coat one size looser than it once fit, but still pressed, still proud. Clara walked beside him in a blue windbreaker, 2 sizes too big, her tiny face hidden beneath aviator sunglasses she'd insisted on wearing for the mission. Inside the jet, Diana greeted them. She stood with one hand still wrapped lightly in a compression glove, her other hand outstretched in greeting. "I figured you'd say yes," she said. Adam grinned. "I figured you'd give me no real choice." As the engines roared to life, Clara buckled herself in and peered out the window. "How long till we're in the air?" Diana leaned over. 10 minutes. Clara's eyes sparkled. "Is it okay if I pretend I'm in a movie?" Diana smiled gently. "You're not pretending. This is the movie." 5 hours into the flight, Clara had fallen asleep between them, her head on Adam's shoulder, her legs curled beneath a military-issued blanket. Diana sipped warm tea and stared out at the clouds. "Funny thing," she said quietly. "I've flown this route a dozen times, for surgeries, reassignments, evaluations. But this time, it feels different." Adam nodded. "Because it's not just a trip, it's a return." She turned to him. "Exactly." A pause. Then Diana added, "You know they offered me the best specialists for this final procedure. DC, Germany, even Switzerland. But I chose Hawaii, why, 'cause that was the first place I dreamed of going after she said. Not before the blast, not before the scars. After. It became a symbol, not of escape, but of arrival." Adam looked down at his daughter, then back at Diana. "Then maybe that's what this trip is for all of us." They landed just past sunset. The air smelled different in Hawaii, warm, salt-tinged and rich with plumeria blossoms. As they descended from the aircraft, the tarmac radiated gentle heat from the day's sun. Navy officers nodded in acknowledgement. A military vehicle was waiting to transport them to guest quarters near the medical center. Clara practically danced across the concrete. "Daddy." "There are palm trees," Adam chuckled. "You've never seen palm trees before?" "Not in real life," she shouted. "They look like fireworks growing out of the ground." Diana turned to Adam as the vehicle started. "You know there's a beach on base that's closed to the public. I reserved it for tomorrow. Just a short walk, sunset view, no reporters, no medals, just sand and sea and breathing." Adam tilted his head. "That a proposal?" "It's a thank you," she replied. "And maybe a beginning." That night, in a quiet guest room overlooking a moonlit harbor, Adam tucked Clara into a cot with crisp white linens and a navy blue blanket. She was sun-dazed, already, eyes fluttering as he brushed a curl behind her ear. "Daddy," she whispered. "Yeah, baby." She reached under the blanket and pulled something out, a piece of paper she'd been working on. It was a drawing, 3 figures on a beach, one tall, broad-shouldered, one smaller ponytail flying, and one in a military coat with one hand wrapped in bandages. Above them, the words, "Kindness carries farther than wings." Adam didn't say a word. He simply kissed her forehead and turned off the light. And for the first time in years, as he stared out into a warm Hawaiian night, Adam Carter didn't feel like a retired soldier. He felt like a man beginning again. Morning in Hawaii didn't so much arrive as unfold first, as a soft gold spilling across the ocean, then in the rustle of palm leaves swaying gently above the base housing. The breeze carried with it the scent of hibiscus salt, and something sweet that Adam couldn't name, but already knew he'd miss when he left. He stood on the veranda outside their guest quarters, barefoot, sipping coffee from a military-issue mug. Clara had woken at dawn already in flip-flops, already asking about seashells. She now wandered the grass nearby, a journal tucked under her arm, drawing birds she couldn't name. He turned slightly at the sound of footsteps. Diana. She wore a loose white blouse, her uniform for once tucked away. Her scars were visible unapologetically so. No scarf, no glove, just her. And somehow it felt like the first time he'd truly seen her outside the shadow of survival. "Morning," she said. Adam raised his mug in greeting. "You look rested." She smiled. "I feel it. First time in years I didn't wake up expecting pain." They stood in quiet for a moment, watching Clara crouch beside a flower bush, studying a snail like it held the secret to the universe. "She's a bright one," Diana said. Adam nodded. She got her mother's curiosity. Diana turned to him. "And your stubbornness," he chuckled. "That's what my sister says." Later that morning, the three of them walked together toward the private beach. It was hidden behind a low ridge near the edge of the base, accessed by a winding path of lava rock and overgrown ferns. The air smelled of coconut oil and sun-warmed sand. When they crested the hill, the ocean greeted them like an old friend, calm, glassy, and shimmering under a pale blue sky. The beach was completely empty, except for a small picnic table and two folding chairs set under a tilted umbrella. Clara ran ahead, sandals flapping arms wide. Adam and Diana followed slowly. "You weren't kidding," Adam said, taking in the view. Diana shrugged. "If I'm going to be cut open again, I might as well see heaven beforehand." He turned to her, more serious now. "You scared?" She considered, then answered honestly. "Not of the surgery, but of finishing it, and still feeling like a stranger in my own skin." Adam looked down, then back at her. "Then maybe what you need isn't to finish healing. Maybe it's to belong again." She looked away for a second. "You think I can?" "I know you can," he said, voice steady. "But you don't have to do it alone." The day passed, not in grand gestures, but in quiet, extraordinary moments. They built sandcastles. Clara insisted on digging a fortified moat system around hers. Diana helped, laughing freely for the first time Adam could remember hearing. They swam, Clara first, then Adam. Diana joined last, hesitantly removing her shirt to reveal more of her scarred shoulder and upper back. Neither Adam nor Clara flinched. They simply welcomed her in. Later, they picnicked on grilled mahi-mahi and tropical fruit. Clara fed crumbs to a bold little bird that kept returning, no matter how often they waved it away. As the sun dipped lower, casting everything in amber, Clara dozed under the umbrella, her sketch pad open beside her. Another drawing, the three of them holding hands standing in the surf. Diana watched her sleep. She sees things others miss. Adam nodded. She always has. A pause. Then Diana said softly, "You asked me once if I was scared. I wasn't honest." Adam turned to her. She continued, "I'm scared. Not of the surgery, but of living a life that doesn't mean anything after all this. I survived, and I'm afraid of wasting that survival." Adam's voice was low. "You haven't wasted anything." She met his eyes. "Then tell me, why did you give me that seat?" He held her gaze. "Because you looked like someone who'd spent too long sitting in the back." Her breath caught slightly, and she blinked fast. "You say things like that, and expect people not to fall apart." He smiled faintly. "Falling apart's just another way to start rebuilding." A long moment passed between them. No movement, just understanding. Just quiet. Then she leaned over and placed her hand, scarred strong, on top of his. "I'm glad you showed up." "I'm not leaving," he said simply. That night, after showers and dinner, and a long stretch of gentle silence, Adam tucked Clara into bed. The base guest quarters were simple. 2 rooms, clean sheets, ocean breeze slipping through the screen windows. Clara looked up at him, half asleep already. "Is she going to be okay?" Adam sat on the edge of the bed. "I think so. She's kind," Clara murmured. "She is." A pause. "Are you going to help her more?" Adam brushed a curl from her forehead. "If she lets me." Clara gave a sleepy smile. "You always say kindness matters." "It does. I think it's helping her remember who she is. Adam swallowed the lump rising in his throat. Yeah, baby. I think you're right. Later that night, Adam stepped outside again. Diana was there, standing at the railing, overlooking the dark sea, wrapped in a light blanket. The moon floated above the horizon, like a quiet sentinel. They didn't speak at first. They just stood side by side. Then, without looking at him, she said, "If this is what healing feels like, I didn't know it could be so beautiful." Adam looked at her, the ocean behind her, the silver light on her scars, and thought, "You are the most beautiful thing I've seen in a long time." But he didn't say it. He simply nodded and whispered, "Welcome back." The days on base began to slow in the best way. By midweek, Adam had stopped checking his watch. Clara had memorized the names of every local bird in a library book she borrowed. And Diana, in a rhythm foreign yet welcome, began smiling more with her eyes, without hiding, without apology. It was the first time in years she wasn't watching her back or guarding her heart. On Wednesday evening, as golden light stretched across the water, the three of them shared dinner on the beach once more, this time without formality. Diana wore a plain sundress, her hair tied back loosely. Adam had traded his boots for sandals. Clara, as usual, had pockets full of shells. They sat around a driftwood fire pit someone had built long ago, roasting pineapple over the flames and telling stories about the worst meals ever eaten in uniform. Clara declared the winner was a tie between Diana's powdered egg on sandwich confession and Adam's story of a chilly MRE that exploded mid-patrol. Laughter rolled between them like ocean waves. But as dusk deepened and stars began to prick the sky, the tone shifted. Not heavy, but tender. Intimate. Diana leaned forward, elbows on her knees. The flicker of the fire danced across the uneven surface of her skin. "I get the final surgery next week," she said quietly. "They'll be taking skin from my thigh and redoing the lower side of my jaw." Adam looked at her, not with worry, but something steadier respect. "You nervous?" he asked. She nodded. "More than I expected. Not about the pain, not even the result." Clara, sitting cross-legged beside her, tilted her head. Then what Diana glanced at the girl, then Adam, then the fire. That I'll walk out of it and not recognize the person in the mirror. That I won't feel like me anymore. Clara reached out and took Diana's hand gently without flinching. "But you already are you." Diana blinked fast. The heat from the fire wasn't what burned her eyes now. Adam spoke, his voice low but firm. "You're more you than most people ever get to be. You know what it means to hurt and still show up." There was silence after that, deep, not awkward. The kind of silence only possible between people who'd found something rare in each other. Later that night, with Clara asleep in the quarters, Adam and Diana found themselves back on the balcony, sipping hot tea overlooking the lights of the harbor. Soft music played from someone's open window nearby. A gentle jazz melody half carried by the breeze. Diana swayed slightly, a distant memory flickering behind her expression. "You know," she said, smiling faintly, "when I was a cadet, I used to dream about dancing under the stars, with someone who wouldn't be scared of how strong I was." Adam chuckled. "And did that happen?" She turned to him, eyebrow arched. "Not once." He stood slowly, extending a hand. "Well, it's never too late." She hesitated, not because she was afraid, but because this was sacred ground, a space she hadn't stepped into in years. Romance, softness, the possibility of being seen, not just as a soldier or a survivor, but as a woman. But Adam's hand didn't waver, so she took it. They danced. No music, but the wind, the waves, and the occasional chord floating through the tropical night. Diana leaned into him slowly. Adam moved with surprising grace for a man more used to combat boots than slow steps. She rested her head briefly against his chest. He said nothing, just let her be. After a time, she pulled back slightly, her hand still in his. "There's something I've been thinking about," she said. "After the surgery, I'll be grounded for a few weeks. But after that, they're asking me to consult on veteran reintegration programs, stateside, civilian-led support." Adam nodded. "Sounds like something that needs doing. They asked if I knew someone who could join, not as a soldier, as a peer, a mentor." Adam raised an eyebrow. "You volunteering me?" Diana's voice was quiet. "Only if you want to keep doing what you're already doing, changing people with kindness." He looked out at the water for a long moment, then back at her. "I'm in," he said. The next day, Diana began preparing for her surgery. Paperwork, pre-op meetings, physical tests. Adam stayed close, not hovering, just present. Clara drew pictures and left them by Diana's bedside every night. One drawing showed Diana with angel wings and boxing gloves. Another showed a heart stitched at the center, but glowing gold. On the last night before the procedure, the three of them sat on the guest quarters floor, playing cards, Clara winning more than she should have. "You two cheat," Adam grumbled. "You're just bad at bluffing," Diana smirked. After Clara went to bed, Diana walked Adam to the door. There, under a soft porch light, she paused. "If something goes wrong, it won't," he said gently. But if it does, he stepped closer, placing a hand over hers. "Diana, you've already come through fire. This is just another step." Her eyes shimmered. Then softly, "Stay," after Adam nodded. "I'm not going anywhere." They didn't kiss. Not yet. But there was no doubt now that something had bloomed between them, unexpected, rooted in quiet sacrifice, and ready to grow. The operating room smelled faintly of antiseptic and salt. Beyond the double doors, waves lapped against the Navy base shoreline, indifferent to the fact that someone inside was reclaiming her face, her future, herself. Diana Collins lay perfectly still under the lights, monitors beeping in steady rhythm, while surgeons in pristine gowns moved with rehearsed precision. The procedure was complex. Skin grafting, minor nerve realignment, careful restructuring of the left jawline. But to Adam, sitting in the waiting area just down the corridor, it felt like time had stopped. Clara sat beside him, curled against his arm, her sketch pad open in her lap. She wasn't drawing, just holding it. "She's gonna be okay, Daddy," she said. He nodded, though his jaw was clenched. "I know." But in truth, this was the first time in years Adam had felt afraid, not the battlefield kind, not the kind that whispers in your ear when things go wrong. This was the fear of hope, of letting yourself believe that something broken could actually become whole again. The surgery lasted over 6 hours. When it was done, a young doctor came into the waiting room, peeling off his cap. "She's in recovery," he said. "Stable? Strong." She did beautifully. Adam closed his eyes and let out a long breath he didn't realize he'd been holding. "Can I see her?" Clara asked. The doctor smiled. "Just family for now." Adam opened his mouth, ready to explain, but the doctor interrupted gently. "She listed both of you." Diana looked peaceful in the hospital bed, her face wrapped with medical gauze of dripping slowly beside her. Her good hand rested lightly over her chest. Adam pulled up a chair. He didn't speak. He didn't need to. He just sat with her. Present. Solid. Still. Clara placed a new drawing on the table beside the bed. It showed Diana standing on a mountain sun rising behind her scars, glowing like medals of light. "You are brave," it read. "Not because you fight, but because you feel." 2 weeks passed. Diana recovered faster than anyone expected. The bandages came off. The swelling faded. Her jawline, while not perfect by magazine standards, was real hers. Balanced. Strong. the kind of face that bore witness to fire and came through. She was different, not because her features had changed, but because she now stood in front of mirrors without lowering her gaze. On the day of her official release from medical care, something unexpected arrived. A package, brown paper, no return address, but sealed with the official crest of the White House, inside a mahogany box and a handwritten card. Colonel Collins, your story was shared with us by those who saw not just the scars, but the soul behind them. You reminded the nation that leadership isn't built in press rooms, but in quiet acts of courage. Please accept this token, not as reward, but as recognition, on behalf of a grateful country. Inside the box was a limited presidential citation medallion, one reserved only for private commendations, rarely seen, never publicized. But Diana didn't cry for the medal. She cried for the envelope tucked beneath it, addressed not to her, but to Clara Carter. Dear Clara, I heard you stood by someone strong and made them feel seen. That kind of courage changes nations. Never stop seeing people. Never stop drawing what others forget to notice. A friend in high places, 3 months later. Spring returned to Vermont, and with it the thawing of the lake. The cabin stood tall among the pines, smoke curling gently from the chimney. Inside, Clara sat at the dining table, now strewn with colored pencils, and a school report titled, "The Power of One Good Thing." Adam was in the kitchen wearing his old apron, whistling low as he chopped vegetables. The radio played Jazz Diana's favorite, because she was there too, not as a visitor. As home, they had returned to the cabin after the recovery, after the consultations, after Diana turned down a Pentagon post to instead co-lead a new initiative with Adam, a peer-to-peer veteran reintegration program that taught survival resilience and kindness as part of civilian reentry. They called it the Fire Within. It grew faster than anyone imagined. 1 month in, they had waiting lists. 2 months in, they had partnerships across 5 states. 3 months in, their story had quietly gone viral. But neither of them sought attention. They sought impact. On the porch one evening, Diana sat with Adam as Clara played near the lake with 2 other veteran families visiting the area. Diana wore jeans and a soft sweater. Her face bore the faded lines of old wounds, but now they looked like rivers on a map leading somewhere important. "Do you ever miss the battlefield?" she asked. Adam thought for a moment. "Some days, but not for the fight, for the brotherhood." She nodded. "Me too." He turned to her. "Funny thing is, I never had this kind of bond before. Not like this." "With me?" she asked, eyebrow raised. "With both of you." He reached into his pocket and pulled something out, a small model helicopter painted green and white. "Marine One," Diana smiled. "You kept it?" "Of course," he said. "It brought you here." She looked at him, then slowly leaned into his shoulder. Quiet. Safe. Whole. That night, as Clara slept soundly, and the trees whispered through open windows, Adam stood beside the fireplace. The marine pin Diana had once gifted him now hung framed beside her citation and Clara's White House letter. He picked up his old field notebook and flipped to the last page. With a steady hand, he wrote, "Some people collect luxury, others collect headlines. But we collect kindness, and with it, we move mountains." He closed the notebook, then turned toward the soft laughter echoing from the porch, and walked back toward his second chance. "We'd love to know, where in the world are you watching from? Let us know in the comments. It means more than you know to hear from each of you. And if this story touched your heart, consider subscribing to Soul Moment Story for more inspiring tales of kindness, healing, and second chances. Thank you so much for spending your time with us today. Until next time, stay kind, stay hopeful, and take care of one another.